Welcome. This is Andy Housley, the CFO of NSL Analytical and part of the board of directors, which is a portfolio company of May River Capital. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Really appreciate you having me.
No worries. Awesome. So please may you share some background around your career journey and how did that influence your pathway towards the TIC industry?
Sure. So I guess maybe I'd frame it up best of kind of a good timing and good luck. Maybe I'll step back and originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, so grew up kind of in the heart of Silicon Valley at a great time. So it was kind of pre all the heavy tech companies that you see now. It was very semiconductor focused. Actually, my dad and my godfather were both in the semiconductor industry, and randomly enough, both spent time in the TIC sector.
Wow.
So I got to see kind of at an early age a lot of the culture and kind of interesting science that goes on within the TIC sector. I got a little bit of that around the kitchen table as opposed to in the professional world.
Yeah.
So I always had kind of a good place for the TIC industry as a whole, and just found it super interesting. My path wasn't smart enough to be a scientist, so I went in the finance side, but I was a CPA out of school with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I would frame that up of good timing as well. So I started in Silicon Valley right at the beginning of Sarbanes-Oxley, which was complete chaos. I think everybody was trying to figure out what was going on. You had collapse of Enron. You've got coming off of recession, pretty wild time in the market. And I think we had more public companies than anywhere in the world. And so super early on in my career, I just got a ton of reps of working with really cool, great companies and great executives who were very vulnerable during that time of sharing what they were going through and the unknowns. So I had just an awesome kind of path through PwC. After grad school, I then came back into PwC as part of the transaction services and more of the consulting side, and got the opportunity to work with just a ton of big private equity clients, large companies that were going public, and just really got a good sense of, again, learning what they do and what makes companies successful and sometimes not successful. And so with that, I kind of took the approach of I wanted to be both the judge, jury, and executioner, and to do that, you have to actually do the work. And so I wanted to get out in a company, eventually be a CFO, and show that I could actually do it as opposed to just consulting on it or parachuting in and parachuting out. And so that's where I got an opportunity in the TIC space that came up. And, again, timing is everything. Came into EAG Laboratories, which I think at the time we had like 26 labs throughout the world. And just awesome group of people, great mentors. The old CEO there, who's still in the TIC sector, and I think is one of the smartest people within the sector. The current president, the CIO, just great mentors of mine that allowed me to learn the industry and learn my role within it too, and how to proceed there. So, really had a great experience with EAG. We sold that then into Eurofins Scientific, where I got to see a much larger TIC company. I think they have 900 plus labs throughout the world. It was great, and got to see it from a large public company and the differences, and again, what makes things successful and what has improvement needs. And so with that then is where the opportunity came up to join NSL Analytical and acquire that company alongside May River Capital. And I've been doing that now for 4 years, and it's just been an awesome experience. So that's the quick summary of the background, but it's a function of timing and luck, man.
Yeah, nice, awesome. You touched on it a little bit there, but maybe worth delving into a little bit more detail. How much of an impact have mentors played within your success?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's everything, right? I mentioned a few there on the EAG side.
Yeah.
Also the private equity firms, that are supporting these companies as sponsors. I got the opportunity at EAG, was a Odyssey Investment Partners company, and you couldn't ask for better stewards of a business. I mean, they were really amazing, and allowed me to learn as well, and some mentorship there. May River Capital, associated with NSL now. Again, just wonderful people and great stewards of a business. And so when you're around these people on a daily basis, you're constantly learning. I mean, these are really, really smart people. It's humbling, right? It's a great experience to always be learning then. And our current CEO, who's a good friend of mine as well, and maybe frame him up as a part-time psychologist for me, but he, Ron Wessel, he's a wonderful mentor as well. And so kind of throughout my career, I've had just amazing experiences with that. And that is just, that's the make or break it, in my opinion. And actually brings up an interesting point, Thomas, of, I'm quite concerned that we haven't seen all the impacts really of the remote workforce right now. I think exactly your point about mentorship is such a key in any career, especially early on, right? If I'm a young kid coming out of school, and I'd beg to be in the office. I mean, that's where you get not just the mentorship, but you also get the colleagues, right? And you get your ability to ask the dumb questions that we all have in a safe space, and not have to set up a 30-minute Zoom call to do that. So I'm actually quite concerned that the remote workforce that we haven't seen all the implication of that coming through within the learning and mentorship side. But that being said, I'd give you the bright side from our industry. In the TIC space, nobody's taking their instruments home with them on the science side. No. So, just from the nature of the beast, we tend to not be as remote, which I think drives a very positive culture all around.
Very good. So specifically on NSL, I'd be really interested to learn a little bit of the background around the business, and also how has it evolved, over the past 4 years since you've been with the company?
Yeah. Awesome company, NSL, and wonderful people, which, this probably better than anybody in our industry is, we're not making widgets. And so it's a human capital game, right? And when you're lucky enough to have good people around you, good things tend to happen. And I think that's NSL in a summary. Maybe stepping back on the company. So we have 2 laboratories in the Cleveland, Ohio market. One, we focus on analytical chemistry. So we think about the composition of raw materials or finished products, trace element analysis. Many times we're looking at elements at parts per billion. Very interesting stuff and cutting edge in so many industries. We also have a metallurgical and mechanical testing lab, which focuses more on characteristics and performance of finished metal part. Both labs are incredible in what they do. I think about our journey for the last 4 years. I would love to take more credit for what we've done, but really the foundation and the bones of the business are really good. And so what we were able to do, I think, coming in was add some investment in the company. And I can kind of talk through some of the strategic investments that we think are interesting going forward. But really allowing the farmers to farm, right? They had great scientists. And I always use the analogy that the people that were on the bus were the right people. They may not have always been in the perfect seats. And so I think we tried to help move some folks around to get the best out of them. And then we've added some key roles and some real professionals within the TIC space. We added not just a board member in Francois Marty, but we added a vice president of operations who's got a great background in the TIC space, larger TIC companies. He's seen it, he's run them. We have a thesis within the additive manufacturing space that I think is amazing. And we brought in a vice president of science and technology who's world-renowned within that space. So again, I would love to say we've done more outside of try to bring the right people together. But this company, it focuses on trust, technology, and turnaround is how we view it. And
Nice.
we've tried to take each one of those fundamentals and optimize them. Trust is the quality side, right? Where that's the cornerstone of everything we do, is going to be accuracy and doing it right. Technology, we're going to make strong investments in being cutting edge, and we believe being thought leaders in these markets. And turnaround, right? That's the name of the game, man. Is you got to get it turned around fast, and we take pride in that. We obsess over it. I analyze it on a daily basis. I mean, I love it. So that's how that's how we go to war every day. Is we think about those three and we try to optimize them.
Nice. Well said. So, super dynamic industry. There's a huge amount of unknowns. Just broadly, how do you navigate those challenges on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially right now, man. Without having Biff's almanac and knowing the future, it's a tough environment, right? I think if you step back in the world right now, right, you've got macro issues in the financial side, whether that's a rising interest rate environment. You've got micro issues throughout numerous countries, spending levels within the US. You've got demographic issues through China and unemployment. You've got geopolitical issues that over the last week or two have even gotten much more escalated. I think any one of those could cause such a ripple effect in a broad economy. It'll give you anxiety, right? So I try to take a different approach to that. I use, I guess, more the Jim Cramer philosophy of life, that there's a bull market somewhere. And so I stay, actually, I'll start with the TIC industry, right? I look at it from a super high level of the TIC industry and say, I don't think anybody's going to tell you there's going to be less regulation down the road, right? So that's the first step. Two, we have the ability to be safer in our world. And whether that's the food you eat, whether it's the medicine you put in your body, whether it's a plane that you're flying in the sky or a rocket that you're watching going into space, we have the ability to make sure those are better and more accurate for people. Why would you not take that into consideration, or why would you not invest in that? And so to me, that's a part of the value stream going forward. So to me, again, that's the fundamental demand drivers of the TIC space. So that's positive. Now, within that, there's always going to be ups and downs in markets. And so I'm a really firm believer, as opposed to trying to analyze each one of these negative issues that could be positive at times, I like to find really good end markets that we could play in, that we feel are robust. And in the case of NSL, we do a lot in the aerospace and defense industry, space, as I mentioned, commercial space. I mentioned earlier additive manufacturing. I mean, sure, this is an industry that may have some ups and downs, but I think a consensus is somewhere around 20% plus CAGRs up through 2030 within additive. Those are markets I love. And so to answer the question, I guess broadly, is I try not to get the anxiety around the daily issues or the Jamie Dimon negative, the world's coming to an end tomorrow. I think, especially in the TIC space, we can play in some really cool, robust markets, be cutting edge, and lead the world in a positive direction.
Awesome. That's perfectly led on to this one then. So, I mean, what trends and themes, key ones, are you seeing within the market now?
Yeah, I guess I'd probably bucket that into there's a few different buckets there. Let me think about it. So I think there's trends that you're going to see that are a function of timing in the world that we live in, right? And so ESG, that's going to be a global issue that is a common theme among both public and private companies. That's a function of the timing that we're in the world. And I think the TIC space can play a very key role in that, right? As you're seeing in the larger TIC companies that have huge initiatives through ESG. So I think those are very broad themes that you'll continue to see. I think there's TIC specific themes that we're all working on right now that are interesting. And those I would frame up more like, if the demand drivers are good, and you're not having to sell your story to the industry, then you focus on competition. And as you know, Thomas, our industry isn't always based on another independent lab that you're competing with. It could be competing with a company taking it in-house versus outsourcing it.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big piece of competition. So how do you win over that competition? Well, you do it more efficiently and more effectively. Again, we look at it in our trust and technology and turnaround, but as a whole, these are themes that you're seeing with the big tech companies as well. Lean laboratory layouts. That's been around for a long time. 10 years ago, you say lean, it's lean manufacturing. Now it's very common to think about lean laboratory layouts, and it's a cost of doing business. LIM systems, so the laboratory information management system within companies, there's a lot of work to be done on that. We just put a new LIM system in at NSL last year, and we're reaping the benefits of that, but that's not an easy task. And some of the more decentralized tech companies, I think that's going to continuously be a challenge on the technology front. Use an example. Think about instrumentation to a LIM system. Common sense would tell you, well, it's just an API that moves the data back and forth. Well, in our industry, I pick a number, 75% is my guess. Those are homegrown APIs between the system. And, there's not enough R&D within the TIC space, because that's not really what we do in the nature of our companies. And the industry as a whole is just big enough, but not big enough where all these vendors are pitching just to our industry. And we're very specialized in a lot of ways. So that brings challenges. So that's probably the second bucket. Is I think you're seeing a lot of IT operational effectiveness targets and metrics and pushing to get there. The third is probably like aspirational trends. And I'll preface this, Thomas, that I'm like probably the worst guy to talk about AI. I can hardly spell AI, but I think like something like that, to me, predictive analytics, right, within our industry. How do you get a 25 or a 30-year PhD scientist he or she is an absolute expert within their field, getting some of it from here out into something that's more general for people to use? That's going to be, that's the gold mine that we have to get to. That's going to drive efficiency. If you have a scientist, again, use my 25, 30-year PhD, amazing scientist, may be able to look at results coming out of an instrument and within a few minutes to 30 minutes be able to say, I know what that element is. I've seen this a million times. I know what the charts and graphs tell me. Versus a much more junior scientist may come in and say, it could be one of 100 things, and I got to take that to the library and search it and check it. I don't know, what is that? A 3 or 4 hour exercise. You just do the math on efficiency. That's a huge, huge throughput issue when you're talking about turnaround time. Man, that could solve a lot of issues, but we're not there. I know a lot of companies are working on complex software for that. I look at that much more as aspirational of where we need to get to, and probably some themes we'll see, from now into the next 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. So throwing it back to you sort of personally, working hard, traveling the world, and trying to find that healthy work-life balance. Are there any habits or practices that help you, promote self-growth, continuous learning, work-life balance, all of those topics?
That's a good question. If you ask my wife, I probably don't do any of them very well. Maybe I'll break it up. Like, I think there's a work-life balance piece to that, and then there's kind of routine and self-growth and how we handle it. I take a kind of a different view to work-life balance. I'm trying to remember. I read it was the old Pepsi CEO. She used to be the CFO there, Indra Nooyi, I believe. Okay. She wrote a book around summarizing work-life balance, and there is no perfect work-life balance, and there's sacrifices. And so I think you have to come in with a mindset that one, we're all going to have to work hard in this world if we're going to succeed, and you might as well have a good time while we're doing it. And I kind of, each day I treat this one. I'm super lucky with my path and the position I'm in, so I'm appreciative of that, and I want to work super hard every day to maintain that and to kind of leave my mark. So with that, I treat it more. I treat it like a game of Monopoly each day, right? Like I get to go out and play this game, and I get to have a good time while I'm doing it, meet some really cool people. And so with that, then the work life tends to then overlap, and it doesn't bother me that it does. So that's kind of how I guess I view it. It's a mental change in how we view work-life balance versus structuring a very separate approach. I just can't do that. I think the second piece of your question, though, is like healthy habits or practices. And that's that one I do take a lot of pride in, of like, I try to be very consistent with stuff. So, I travel a lot. And when I travel, I try to maintain as much routine as I can so that the world doesn't feel different every day, whether it's eating maybe different restaurants, but similar type stuff, waking up at similar times, working out at similar times. Developing routine to me is very, very important. And I think it keeps driving that consistency then every day that we need. And so, with that, I think that's a big piece is routine and then focus. And, being really present in whatever you're doing and excited about what you're doing. I think that focus level, so the routine helps us separate it. And then when we're ready to do it, it's focus, man. And I don't know, it's always a balance, and I don't think anybody gets it perfect. So I'm always working on it myself, but that's kind of how I view work-life balance. And then my one-offs that I try to do to stay consistent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, Andy.
Hey, Tosh, I really appreciate you having me, man. And, I look forward to hearing more about others, in the TIC space. And so I'm super excited to hear other podcasts as well. But thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks so much.